Hey everybody, what is hell? What's hell? Why do I bring that up? Because there was an article this past week in the Wall Street Journal by Lance Morrow, How We Think About Hell. And it got me thinking about hell. He starts off by saying Pope Francis was asked earlier this year what he thinks about hell. Quote, "It's difficult to imagine it," he replied. "What I would say is not a dogma of faith, but my personal thought. I like to think hell is empty. I hope it is." That's Pope Francis. I would like to think that someone who commits a tremendous act of evil experiences something more than just emptiness as a repercussion for his evil actions. And in fact, the writer here says it was a pastoral pleasantry, kindly meant but theologically sloppy. Theologically sloppy it was. And then he goes on to ask, is the eternal fire a metaphor? If so, what does it mean? Is hell a physical place or a state of mind? Is there such a thing as eternal life? And if God's verdict goes against you, does that mean a life of everlasting torment? Is it possible to believe in hell if you don't believe in God? Or is hell the terrible solitude of living without God? Fair questions. Okay. Some of the letters later on took him to task, this writer, for not citing biblical references. So I wanted to share with you, and obviously a topic of this nature is very difficult to cover in a 5 or 6 minute video, but I did want to share with you a few Jewish ideas about it. Number one, firstly, Judaism definitely believes in a notion of an afterlife, of a heaven and a hell. We believe in that. Some people are kind of surprised at that, but traditional Judaism definitely believes in it. Sometimes there's a confusion based on a couple different things, and one of the reasons that there's a confusion about this is that the Torah Shebiksav, the 5 books of Moses, the Tanakh in general, doesn't really talk too much about the afterlife. The Tanakh deals with the here and the now primarily. And most of our notions and ideas and traditions about Olam Haba, the next world, about heaven and hell, come from the Torah Shebal Peh, the oral tradition. It's passed down. So yes, we believe in it, but it isn't a focal point of our religion. We're much more focused on Tikkun Olam, perfecting the world, perfecting ourselves. Obviously, we have that in the back of our mind, and Maimonides in his 13 Principles of Judaism and of Faith talks about that. But again, it's not the thing that animates what we do. We're more focused on doing what's right in the here and now. Yes, it's there in the back of our mind, but that's God's business. Don't worry too much about it. Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, kind of expresses a Mishnah that tells us how it's kind of hard to imagine the next world. And it says that if you took all the pleasure of this world, you wrapped it all up, it doesn't equal one moment of pleasure of the next world. All the pleasures of this world, all of them together don't equal one moment of pleasure of the next world. However, all of the next world doesn't equal one act of mitzvahs and good deeds of this world. What's Pirkei Avot getting at? It's telling us that they're two completely different worlds, and you can't really imagine one. We can't imagine the next world. It's saying that this world is one of doing, of action. We have free choice. We don't have that once the soul leaves the body. And so we can't imagine what that is. Like, I often think, like, what's my dad been doing for the last 10 years or whatever since he's left this world? And people who've left for hundreds of years, what have they been doing? Because we're in a world of doing. They're not doing. There's an idea of an intense pleasure and intense repercussions. And that's why the next world is referred to as Olam HaEmet, the world of truth, where there's a full expression of every action that you've done, good or bad. And so, and it doesn't stop. It's not like, see, most people, and again, this Christian concept of heaven versus hell, you go to one place or another depending on what your belief is. Do you believe in Jesus? Do you not believe in Jesus? Judaism says that it's much more nuanced than that. That heaven and hell are full expressions of Olam Hamet, of all the actions that you've done, given all the factors of where you come from and your natural inclinations, the time period that you live in, the people that you live around, all these things are factors. You know, the Talmud says that tzaddikim, righteous people, don't rest even in the next world, because you do an action, it affects somebody, which affects another person, which affects another person in many different ways. And so you keep cashing in the dividends. And the opposite works. People who do evil things, bad things, people still quote Hitler. So therefore there still becomes repercussions of the evil that he represents. And it's never ending, and it keeps going on and on and on and on and on. And so, yes, Judaism believes in a notion of the afterlife. I think it could be best summed up in a story. I don't even remember the source of it, but it talks about the difference between, God gives a guy a tour of heaven versus hell. So he takes him down to hell, and what is it? It's 10 people sitting around a really, really delicious smelling stew. And it's a weird setup because they have a label that's a ladle tied very tightly to their arm so they can't bend their elbow. So they could dip the ladle into the stew, but they can't bring it to their mouth. And that's what it is. It's all these pots of stew, 10 people around each pot, and they're all going through this very frustrating experience. And God says, okay, now it's time for you to see heaven. And he takes up to heaven, opens up the pearly gates, and what is it? The exact same thing. 10 people around a pot, thing tied to their arm, and they can't bring it to their mouth. But it's heaven. It's got to be different. So what's the difference? I'll give you a moment to think about it. Here's the answer. They're feeding each other in heaven. In hell, they'd rather go through an eternity of frustration before they give the next guy. And so it's a beautiful story, because what is it saying? It's saying that you're there in front of the Almighty in his full expression of goodness and truth and everything spiritual. To the degree that your life is spiritual, to that degree that you did things that are a reflection of God, to that degree, it's heaven. And to the degree that you didn't, that's hell. It was a missed opportunity. You don't relate. You don't connect. You don't know what's going on. It's like you could have two people sitting in a symphony. For one person, it's heaven on earth. For another, it's hell on earth. It all depends on, do you appreciate the music or do you not? So those are some of the couple ideas of the Jewish view of heaven and hell. Again, the bottom line is, don't worry about it too much. Meaning, focus on the here and now, doing what's right, doing what's true, doing what's good, helping each other, getting truth out there. Heaven will come naturally when we focus on mitzvot and goodness and chesed and kindness. Have a good Shabbat.